All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Conscious Mental Health Podcast. Today, our guest is Dr. Angel Jackson. Angel is an entrepreneur, author, podcaster, consultant, and a licensed and ordained minister who provides opportunities for others to look inward and discover their greatness through her writing and speaking. She's the owner of One Holistic Living and the author of The Power of Change: Understanding Your Resilience in the Midst of Growth, and the Gratitude Awakening Practice, a daily practice to discover your greatness. And she's also the co-founder of the Healing Tent podcast, where she provides insightful and impactful conversations to elevate the community. So she's an experienced podcaster and podcast guest and speaker, and I'm so excited to get to talk with her and learn from her today. Welcome, Angel. Thank you so much for being with us here.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to just, me and you, as I like to say, have those spring transformational conversations just to learn more about each other and how we can continue just to lead with change.
Yes, lead with change. I love it. So just to get us started, can you share I gave a little intro, but can you share some about your background with our listeners and how this has impacted your path to where you currently are and what draws you to this work that you do?
Oh man, that is such a loaded question. A great
I know.
question, by the way.
It's a
I
lot.
love it. I love it. So yes, I'm Angel Jackson. I am from Jeffersonville, Indiana, but I was born in Fort Riley, Kansas. My dad was in the military, so we were able to do some moving around here and there. But I'm so thankful that my parents decided for us to plant our feet here in Southern Indiana. So from there, graduate from Jeffersonville High School. And actually, as soon as I graduated high school, I said, you know what? I want to be a nurse. But you know what? Me and needles and blood does not get along. So obviously, that was not the path that was chosen for me and that I decided to choose. So as I was working as a substitute teacher while I was attending University of Louisville, I got my degree in Pan-African Studies. I finally realized once I graduated, I'm like, okay, I live in Kentucky. I want to work for JCPS. However, schools in Kentucky do not really have a Black History class or, Pan-African Studies. So what exactly can I do? Because I knew I wanted to get an education. So I decided to go back to school and get my master's in special education. And the rest is history. Went back to school and got my degree for educational leadership with my doctoral degree and also in administration. So that's what led me to here. But how does this connect with mental health? As I know our listeners really want to know. I would say probably about 4 years ago, I was an assistant principal and it was the dream job. I mean, I don't know if you can resonate with me, but it's like, you make all these to-do lists, these checklists of like, okay, I'm going to get my degrees. I want this dream job. I'm going to make this amount of money, six figures, all these great things. I have the home, I have the forever husband. And then all of a sudden, COVID hit. And I had to really sit down with myself. And by me sitting down with myself, I really was like, Angel, what are some things that you really want to do? And so I went back to writing my second book. And in the midst of that, God spoke to me, he's like, Angel, you really need a break. And that was tough for me because I knew within my spirit, I needed a break, but also within my mind. And I had already been practicing yoga. I really practiced grounding. I'm an avid walker. I love spending time in nature and hiking. But there was something that clicked in me that I knew that was missing. So I spoke with my husband and I said, look, I need a break. I need a break. And he's like, oh, okay, go take a vacation. No, I was like, no, I literally need a break. I really want to be obedient and follow the will of God, but I know there's something that I need from this time. And so I resigned. And that was really big because I come from a family of educators. Like four or five of my family members work in public school here in JCPS, but then I have family in other parts of, the United States are educators as well. So when I said I'm taking a break, a moment for me, it caught everyone by surprise. So I took that time to start my own business, One Holistic Living. where I teach individuals the power of going inward and discovering their gifts and talents. I also do some consulting work for, charter schools in reference to restorative practices, which is maybe I may get into that a little bit later, but restorative practices, as well as just understanding who we are as educators so we can show up as our authentic self. And so that's just a little bit, a short snippet of me. And I know that was a lot, but hopefully that gives the listeners a little bit of background information about me.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think that's great. It's so interesting to me, and I know to our listeners, I'm sure, like just to hear all of the different pieces that make up a person's life and all of the different, like, you're right. You do, so many of us, and I can resonate with this, we have this sort of prescription
Mhm,
for a linear direction for how things should go, right? And I think that's a
mhm.
product of a lot of us, how we're raised, and a lot of internal messages that we have for ourselves and about ourselves, right? And so I think it's really impactful to hear the story of somebody who had the same sort of mindset, and seemingly, we have all of the things that we've supposed to have been worked for, and that are good in many ways. Like you said, I have my dream job and my house and my husband, and this is all wonderful and beautiful, and it doesn't take away from the goodness of those things, but to just like hear, okay, we can get to this point and we can be told and receive this message that
Mhm.
you might need to be doing something different, because that's really scary for so many people.
Yes.
So to hear the bravery and the courage from someone, I think is really important. So thank you for sharing that part of your life and your story with us. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Um, and just knowing that there can be goodness outside of that prescriptive lens is really cool. So absolutely. Tell me,
I think that's
um,
true. I think that's
yeah.
true. I always say that we have the choice and the option if we're going to operate and move out of fear or we're going to operate and move out of faith. And that
Mm,
is sometimes, I think, we as individuals, we don't know what's on the other side. So we go back into some things that maybe happened from our childhood that we're not really ready to bring to surface. But in order for you to really transform and have this growth mindset, you have to step out of your comfort zone and get uncomfortable with knowing what the possibilities are. And I think that's something that I really try to encompass on my daily walk.
yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was one thing that I was gonna have you tell us a little bit more about, is this idea of the growth mindset. Because in The Power of Change, you do talk about that in your book. And can you conceptualize, like for our listeners, what that means for you, and kind of how you approach that tool and that idea?
Yes, yes. So in reference to like the growth mindset, a lot of educators do talk about it, but I'm going to look at it from just like a holistic standpoint. So for me personally, I had dealt with a lot of different various like traumas growing up. And those traumas that I experienced, I let them carry over into my adulthood. And so I could easily say, hey, Angel, am I going to continue to be a victim, or I am going to step out on faith and have the growth mindset and do that inward work of healing? Because at the end of the day, I like to look at us as a holistic standpoint of our mind, heart, body, and spirit. It's all connected to one. We can't just heal one part and then forget about the other. And that is something that when I'm talking with women or doing consultations, that when I give them this assessment, I tell them, I say, look, you have to be intentional with what this looks like. And so you have to create some sort of balance. And so with me, with the growth mindset, it really means is that, hey, Angel, you do not want to stay stagnant. You can choose to be stagnant and keep on doing the same things over and over and over again. But how are you going to truly grow and elevate? Because at the end of the day, we all want to, we say we want to become our highest self. But that takes a lot of hard work. That takes a lot of mental, work. And there's steps into that. Once you think that you have reached one level of conscious thinking, there's always another level because there's no perfect human, right? But we all want to strive for perfection, and we all want to strive to do our best in our highest self. And so the growth mindset, again, is just you being able to take a step back and say, hey, wherever I am in this current moment, I have a choice to decide, am I going to continue to grow, or if I'm going to stay stagnant, whether that's education, whether that's your relationships with yourself, how you show up for yourself and how you show up for others, whether it is in your physical, capacity, if you want to work out, if you want to eat healthy, there's all these pieces. And so with the power of change, I literally had to decide that. Because, like I said, in this book, I talk about the 5 C's and how I had to have the courage to begin to do that inward work, being restorative with myself, but then having those impactful conversations with my loved ones about various traumas. And then I had to heal from that. And that is all due to the fact of me wanting to grow and not stay stagnant and show up for my 2 kids.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I like that you talk about, this process that you went through for yourself, right? Like it's a process that can work for others, but the fact that you have walked this path for yourself, you've experienced it, is so, again, is so important, because I think, a lot of our listeners are mental health professionals, and so many of folks outside of that world, and maybe outside of the educational world too, you can speak to that, I'm not sure, it's like they think of mental health professionals as these like gurus, right? Like these sort of to use your like perfect selves, that we've reached this level of self-actualization. And then on the other side of it, there's like a lot of or there can be, I think there's a lot of taboo, or has been, about like self-disclosure in the therapy space, and how much of our story do we share. But honestly, I think that is where change can happen most safely, is in relationship, and in sharing our stories with each other, right? Because that's where we feel that empathy, and then like that emotional support, right? And so I would imagine, like with your clients, just sharing that part of your story helps them to feel that bravery to step into that growth mindset, right? I it's interesting to me, because so much of those traumas that we experienced in our childhood, like, we don't realize how much they're holding us back, and I'm curious, for you, you kind of thought for a long time, okay, like I have this all together. Was there a moment where you realized, like, ooh, there are some things that are holding me back that I didn't even think about until right now? Like, oh, I didn't realize I was carrying
Yes,
things around.
there definitely was. It was once I had married, as I like to say, my forever husband. I was born, I was having my son, and at that moment, it's just, I was like, okay, this birth is going to be a little bit different. I knew that the person I was marrying was going to be my forever husband. I knew they understood, but it wasn't until the current role that I had at the district, they had brought forth this, I would say, this framework called restorative practices. And they said, everyone has to do this. Like it's non-negotiable. You have to do this. And so as I was doing the work and reading the books, I realized, I'm like, oh my goodness, I have some traumas that I've never faced. Here I am, I think I was probably like in my mid-20s. Like this is some things that I need to do. So I started talking to my husband. My husband's like, you really need to talk to, maybe a counselor, or talk to your parents about it. But Angel, you have to do the work yourself. And so I began to like start doing the work. And as I went through this framework and learning more about restorative practices, it allowed me to begin to pull back various layers of things that I had pushed down. And so once, I'm a writer, so I had prayed about it. I started, writing, and all of a sudden this book came about. And I had enough courage to talk to my parents about the things that I had, experienced. And they just welcomed me. They loved me. Even as an adult, I needed to do that because that was part of my healing process. But that's what it was. It was me going to do these courses and this training and read this book about restorative practices, really planted that seed of like, Angel, you need to get your stuff together. And then it wasn't until the pandemic that made me realize, oh, there's still some more healing to do. There's levels to this. Oh, you have to step away and figure out what it is that, the next assignment is, or how you can help others heal throughout their journey. And that's pretty tough to do when I am an African American woman, where sometimes we as minorities put stigmas on mental health therapy or therapists or counselors, psychologists, whatever it may be. But I had to do the work for myself. And I tell people all the time, like, you can go sit on a couch and see a therapist or a counselor. That's absolutely fine. But when you go home, that therapist is not going to be there. When you're in your car, when you're hit with various, triggers, you have to do the work. So you have to be your biggest coach. And that is tough for sometimes as adults to do, to be our biggest coach, to do that self-reflecting process. And that's what I communicate with my clients all the time. I can sit here and spend 30 minutes or hour and talk to you about this, and we have this great dialogue. But if you're not willing to do the work, then again, you're going to be stagnant. You're not going to have that growth that you really want and show up as your highest version, as yourself, and to be there for others. So that was, I would say, the spark.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad you are speaking to that, because I think a lot about this, especially recently, just this idea of, I'm a therapist, so I'm sort of biased. Like, I think it's great. But I know that it's not a safe space for everybody,
Yes.
automatically. I know that there's so much very real hurt and trauma that's been like put out into the world, especially toward oppressed people groups and minorities. Yeah. And so I try to kind of keep that at the forefront of my consciousness of like, maybe therapy isn't the way that you're going to heal, and
Yeah.
that's okay. Yeah. If you want to come sit on my couch, please, like, let's do it. But also there are so many other ways that we can approach that. And I think like the idea of you being your best coach kind of aligns with this idea too that I have of like, or that we try to have of like, you're the best expert on you,
Yes.
and so you can work with a therapist, you can work with a coach, you can work with a healer, right?
Yeah.
But you are the only person that's ever had the 100% of your own experience, the fullness of all of your experiences. You and maybe like God, or
Right.
that's a present in your life, right? That kind of
Yes.
knows. But so you have to be that for yourself. You have to understand them, or at least believe that, be open to the possibility that that's true. And so I think it's so cool that you had people in your life, like your husband, who affirmed that for you, because I think a lot of people don't. So to hear that like, you have to do this for yourself and you're capable of it, right?
Yes.
Like, it's not just that this is an assignment that you're being given, but that you have the capacity to do it for yourself.
Right.
That we all have that inside of us, I think is really important.
That's true. That is so true, because oftentimes we feel as if we don't have the capacity, or others have told us that we don't. But that's when you have to, again, go back into your mind, your consciousness, and really begin to figure out, okay, what is the root of this thought? Is this coming out of fear, or is this coming out of the unknown? Like, how can I really begin to, remove these thoughts and replace it with a positive thought of knowing, hey, I don't know what may be on the other side, but I'm willing and able to step out and see what the unknown is and what's impossible. And 9 times out of 10, I know for me, whenever I do that, there's something grand waiting on the other side that I didn't even know that existed.
Yep. Oh, yes. So true. I mean, I have this sign in my office that says no risk, no magic, right? And
Yeah.
it's just it's hard to get to that, or it can be scary to get to that place. Like you said, there's like so much fear, but I think if we can approach that fear with compassion and just be curious about it, right? Rather than
Yes.
ashamed of it. Yeah, that's when we open up those doors to step into that newness and into that magic. And it also sounds like as you're talking that writing, you mentioned I'm a writer, like I got into writing these books, has been a part of your process in so many
Yes,
ways. So
it
it's not
has.
just like you had this process and then you wrote the book, but like the actual writing of the books has been a part of your healing and your growth. So tell us a little bit more about that and about those books and about your
Yes.
processes. Like you can take that in whatever way you want to take it. But
Yeah, I mean, I've always loved to write ever since like in elementary. I was the girl when they were like, okay, let's write about, your favorite vacation. I would just keep on writing. I would write front and back, and then even on the back end of the book or the cover of the book, because that was me. And then I'm just an avid reader. I mean, my seventh grade middle school teacher taught a class called Exploration, which was, a history class about Black history, and which was just so ironic to just think that he was doing this. I kind of think like now my older self, like, because I'm getting close to 40, I'm just like, wow, Mr. Byers is really taking like, some bold moves because, like I know that wasn't part of the curriculum, but you know what? He was doing his job. But I just got this love of writing and reading. And so with my second book, which is called The Gratitude Awaken and Practice, it's a tool that we can use each and every day to discover our gifts and talents. And so I am a journaler each and every day. I wake up, besides this month of July, like I was saying previously, the month of July right now is a month for me to just spend time with my family, travel, really get back out into nature. But I do not wake up at 5 a.m. But when I am back at work each and every each and every work day, Monday through Friday, I am a part of the 5 a.m. club, and I'm an avid reader for books written by Robin Sharma. But he has this book called The 5 a.m. Club. But I get up 5 a.m. I always have a water on my nightstand. I grab it. I take a couple deep breaths in and out, and I'll walk straight to my bathroom, which is AKA my prayer closet. I lay out my prayer cloth. I light my candle. I have my Bible there. I have a devotional, and I say mantras. But this is a time for me to just get in tune with my higher self, which is my spirit, and I set up my intentions of what I want to set for the day and for the week. But I write, I journal, I give thanks, I give gratitude. And so, what that basically looks like, it's me, at least probably sometimes I've been in my closet, my prayer room space for like an hour, but most of the time it's usually about 30 minutes. And it's me just spending time with myself, trying to figure out or just what exactly is what I want to do, making sure I'm staying on the right path. Because if we're not being intentional about that, then there's so many things that can distract us. But by me doing that, I have grown so much. Just that small emphasis of me doing that. I've written in my journal things that I want to say. So, for example, practice is one of my foundational tools that I talk about in the book. Another foundational tool, because there's 5, you have prayer, you have meditation, you have self-reflection, and you have releasing. So I'm gonna give you an example.
mm,
Say, for example, I really want this job, right? And this is true story. This is a true story. So I woke up and I said, you know what? I am a consultant with my business, but this business that I'm doing right now through One Holistic Living, I have like just 2 contracts, right? But I know I still have bills to pay, right? But I would love to be a consultant. Like I'd love to be a full-time consultant. So I laid out my prayer cloth. I wrote in I self-reflect in my journal, put it out there to the universe. So I did this practicing, right? And then I prayed about it. Like I prayed to God, like, God, this is what I really want to do. Then I meditated. So I took a couple deep breaths in and out. I put it out there to the universe. I lit my incense, my candles. I mean, I have it going. I mean, it's flowing in my room. I'm feeling just the presence of God. I just feel all this greatness, joy, abundance is coming to me. And then I self-reflect. So I write in my journal. I'm writing it down. I want to be a consultant, full-time guy, but I want these months off. Oh, this is the pay that I'm seeking. Then I release it. I release it to God. I release it to the universe. That's what I did back in March. Okay. And so I did all of this. And all of a sudden, I found out that an employer that I really enjoyed working with, a boss I really enjoyed working with, that they had this consultant position.
Mm.
This is just an example of the power of, manifesting. This is a power of prayer of practice. And so that is what this book is walking me through. So that's what I kind of talk about in the book. But then also after I go through my, my prayer closet as the gap practice, because that's what it was I was talking to you about, the gap practice, I go downstairs in my gym and I work out for about 20 or 30 minutes. I do all of this before my family gets up because I'm a mother of two young kids. They're not really young, but my youngest, he's 6 years old. But I do all of this because if I realize if Angel doesn't put Angel first, as far as her self-care, I am going to be, I don't want to say terrible, but I'm not going to be my best self for my husband and for my kids. And then for my place of employment, I'm going to, not be able to enjoy my coffee. I'm going to be trying to rush dropping off all the kids. Oh my goodness, I may run a stop sign. I don't know what it is, but I'm just saying if you don't spend intentional time with yourself and with God, you're not going to be able to give greatness. And what I mean by give greatness is gratitude. If you're not showing gratitude to yourself, if you're not showing respect to yourself, if you're not encouraging yourself in the midst of the storm of those moments that happen, if you're not appreciating yourself for who you are at this present moment, and if you're not showing yourself grace by time, you cannot give greatness to others. So I always say you have to give gratitude, respect, encouragement, appreciation, and time to yourself. Then you give it to your family, and then you give it to your community. And that is what, I'm all about, giving greatness each and every day, showing myself gratitude, even in the midst of the mistakes that I make, because we're not perfect. But that is what the gratitude awakening practice is all about. I'm showing you how to be intentional with your time with God and with yourself, and then discovering your gifts and talents, because we all have those gifts and talents, regardless of who we are. We just have to tap into it.
Yeah. Oh, I love this because I think there's a lot of language kind of floating around these days about like manifesting and how do I make these things happen for myself. And I'm not, it's
Yeah.
cool, like it's great. I think it's I think though sometimes we sort of get lost in this idea of like, well, I'll just manifest this thing and it'll be perfect. It'll be exactly like I want it to be, and
Mhm.
sometimes it does. And the more we practice it, the more we become in tune. I think the
Mhm.
spiritual component is so important,
Yes.
in whatever way works for you, but like we
Right.
become more in tune, right? And it's more about a relationship between us and God,
Yes.
us and our higher power, us and the universe, right? About like,
Mhm.
what am I manifesting, but also like, what does God have for me? What does the universe have
Yes.
for me? Right. And
Right.
it's about listening and having gratitude about what's being brought to us and brought from within us, rather than just like a taking. Right.
Yes. Yes.
So yeah, I'm so glad that in that the gratitude is such a piece of it, because I think that's the foundation for moving forward and growth. Like we know that in so many ways. Um
That is
yeah.
so true. That is so true because when I talk to people all the time, or just like even like women that I come across at work or from at church, or just conversations, on social media, whatever it may be, it's like we put out all these things that we want to do, or we say it like, or we're like, okay, I'm going to save this money so I can buy a home, or I'm going to go to the gym 3 times a week so I can be more healthy, or I'm not going to eat sweets as much, or even if I see the red, light go off on Krispy Kreme donuts, I'm not going to go into that right, that drive-through line. I'm going to keep going because I know what my goal is. But it's all about action. Like, we can't just talk about all these things and not do it. And that's the same thing with our mental health. That's the same thing with our physical health. That's the same thing with our physical, our body, our mental, mind, body, heart, and soul. It all requires action. And so that is one thing that I really began to see. I'm like, okay, yes. I mean, you can say you're about the work, but if you're not, if your actions and you're not aligning to the things that you're saying, it's just going to come, it's just not going to mean anything.
Yeah, totally. I agree. I absolutely agree. And I it's really interesting to me too, that in so many ways, like this action that you take on a daily basis to some people, like sitting outside of it, might look like a lot of inaction. And what I mean by that is, I think just coming from my own biased perspective,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like I was raised and kind of grew up in a culture and a system that valued productivity. And that was like,
Uh-huh.
in order for you to be taking action,
Mhm.
like you had to be producing something,
Yeah.
um, and to be doing, it had to be doing to be
Mhm.
active and taking action and not just being. And so the reason I'm saying that is I'm so appreciative of how you integrate this contemplative practice into your action, right? So you are doing things like I'm going to go to the gym, or like I'm going to spend time daily, like doing these things, these active things for myself to take care of myself, but a contemplative practice of just being, like
Yes.
sitting and doing some journaling and some prayer, but also like being present in that moment is part of your action. And so I think, yeah, I'm just so I guess to say I'm just so glad that you're speaking to that, because I think that to many people um, is sort of like not scary, but they're just like, oh, I don't like
Yeah.
a contemplative prayer practice, like what, like that's not taking action, but it is, it is,
Yeah.
being is so important, and learning how to be still. And
Yes, we have to learn how to be still because we are constantly distracted and bombarded by technology and other healthy, I would say, things that are around us, like our family, and food. But it's the same thing when you talk about like intermittent fasting, or if you want to fast and do a spiritual cleanse, like you have to step away, and that's why it's so important to do that, because you're able to get back to reconnect with who you are, because like I said, we always have distractions, but it's all about, as you said, being still and being in that present moment, before all the distractions come. So setting aside that time is amazing.
yeah, and it is a before thing, right? Like we do it as a preventative measure, or like before the distractions come, not like in response or reacting to the distractions. Right. So I appreciate that you like make it a point to do that ahead of time, like that was the first thing that you do
Yes.
every day.
Yes.
Yeah, that's so cool. Well, I'm curious, and I know this is kind of like taking a little bit of a turn, but you are so, so involved and your background is in education, right? And so many of our listeners are in the mental health field somehow. And I think those fields are they're like siblings. They sit so close together and they overlap in so many ways. Um, can you, can you speak a little bit maybe to our listeners about how we can best understand and help educators operating in our systems right
Yes.
now? Because you know i've I mentioned I have some friends in education, and like gosh, it just seems like there's a lot of suffering, to be honest, right now.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what to do about that in my role. So yeah, I guess, can you speak a little bit about that connection and what your need is?
Yes. No, I think that is, I think that's really great that you're bringing this up, because that is part of the reason why I had to take a break from education. Because, in not my current role, but like two roles prior to that, I am a natural servant leader. I mean, I'm the individual that I'm going to be there probably before, school even gets started. I'm going to make sure everything is set up. I'm the individual, if I have to go make a run and go to a home to check on to see how a kid is doing or their family. And it was pretty tough because you see that kids are suffering. You see that there's a lot of socioeconomic things that are going on, not just only that's from our government, but it all trickles down to the families. It could be a single parent home or a two-parent home, and you see a lot of parents and families that are struggling, but then also, and it's impacting the students. And so if it's impacting the students, and of course it's impacting the teachers. And so one way I would say is that teachers are having to deal with a lot. It's not just about, oh, I have to teach this core content and the kids have to get this grade, or it's a standards-based grading, or I have to make sure that no kid is left behind and all these different things. But what we're seeing now in the field of education, that we're having to also be mental health counselors. We're having to talk to the students or even communicate with the parents, finding the parents sometimes, which is, I'm really thankful, in certain districts, they have what is called a youth service coordinator. So the teacher's able to contact the youth service coordinator and get the parent maybe possible finances or help with their LG&E or clothing or whatever it may be. But it's a lot that it's not just teaching. So like I said, it's a lot of, teachers having to take the time to help students learn about their mental health, because students are dealing with a lot. Sometimes kids are dealing with various traumas. Some kids come with special education needs. And what we're seeing is that due to the social economic things that are happening with our government that has trickled down, it's affecting education to the biggest amount. And sometimes some parents, not all, or society, they are leaving it up to teachers to raise their kids. And I would say that is the biggest thing that I've seen. Whereas if like I said, I told you I'm almost 40. What I've seen is that back in our day, parents were more involved. But nowadays, sometimes some parents aren't involved as much as they need to be. And so when you're an educator, you sometimes have to play the parent role. You have to, educate. You sometimes have to, play that spiritual advisor. And I'm saying that to the left as I possibly can. But I remember there were times when I was assistant principal, teachers would come to my office and they would be like, Dr. Jackson, I just need a minute. I just need a minute. And I would say, okay, well, let's talk. Let's have our after 4:30 conversation. And so I always had lamps. I didn't have like fluorescent lights. So it'd be lamps and I would have things going and I would put on light music and they will talk to me. But I think if you're an administrator, you have to set up that space for teachers to have moments to decompress. They have to have that moment to decompress. So for me, that was in my office. I would have some teachers and even parents that would call me and would say, look, I just need prayer. And I'm like, okay, we can do that here. And I'm like, oh Lord, I don't want to get no phone calls, but that was it, because I was that approachable and I knew what they needed and they knew that I could, I could be that listening ear. So I would say for mental health, therapists, is just to allow for teachers to have that space, but really encourage them while they're on the job to take time out to breathe. And for me, it was me going out on our back spots where the janitors were to eat my lunch. That was my time to decompress. And everyone knew that. I'll be like, oh, Dr. Jackson is going on her 20-minute lunch break. I'm turning off my radio. If y'all need me, send me a text message. And my boss, she understood that because that was my time that I needed to get back and reconnect. So yes, I did my gap practice in the morning, but phone calls and everything else that's going, I need a moment just to be. So if, you all as a mental health therapist, if you could just encourage the educators to know, hey, it's okay to take your minute or your time to step away and decompress. While you're on the clock, you do get 20, 30 minutes of lunch free time. You don't have to necessarily have to be available during that lunch period. It's in your contract. You don't have to be there. You don't have to be available. So make sure that you do that. I would say that would be just my biggest thing. And I know that was like a story, answering the question, but I wanted the listeners to understand that if they do communicate with educators and even administrators, to be intentional, take that time of your lunch break and disconnect from your role. You will be able to have a more productive half of the day for that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. And it's, what's coming up for me when I hear that. Thank you for sharing that story. I actually think it's a great example and a great story and speaks exactly to what I was wondering. What's coming up for me as I hear you share that is really just kind of just taking it back around to where it always comes back, which is like our humanity, like the fact that we're
Yes.
humans, you know,
Mhm.
mental health professionals, at the end of the day, we're just humans,
Yes.
educators, humans,
Mhm.
teacher, therapist, parent, student, human. And if we can come, no matter what our role, if we can connect to that
Mhm.
humanness in the other person. So like you were sharing, like, I have lamps, I have music, like I take away this like cold, like sort of clinical or professional facade that we're told that we have to have up in whatever way, in whatever role we're playing in the dynamic, right? If we can just speak to the human
Mhm.
in the other person, the spirit in the other person, maybe like the image of God in the other person,
Yes.
right? Then
Yes.
that makes such a I mean, it just makes such a difference. Like even
It
with the parents that
does.
call you and call you for those things, like you can tell, like they feel that you're speaking to the human in them and not the parent
Yes.
in them, I think.
Yes, because at the end of the day, we have to show each other grace.
Mm,
And as I always like to, when I was in the school building, I would say, at the end of the day, imagine if that kid that is in that desk, if that was your child, or how about if you don't have children? Imagine if that was your cousin or your niece or nephew. How would you want this classroom to feel? How would you treat them? Ultimately, you will want to treat them with the most up due respect, but you would have this sort of just love. Like you said, you would see them as a human. And even if that child or that teacher, whoever does make a mistake, you would then understand, okay, what was the root behind the mistake? Because every choice has an action, every action has a choice. There was a process that went through that. But as an educational leader, it is our job to make sure that we help them see that and guide them through the practice of that.
yeah, absolutely. So as you're thinking about your work, both like as an educator and as a coach and a consultant and all of these pieces that make up your story, um, is there a specific like client or student or an experience we haven't really touched on that stands out, that sort of like touched your heart or changed the way you do the work that you do?
If there was a student or a client, say probably a student.
Mm,
Um, I would say my foundational years in education, I was an EBD self-contained teacher, and I had all boys in my classroom. But what that taught me was that, hey, I have some students in my class that are exceptionally smart, like A's and B's. They're really good, but they couldn't understand their emotions. They couldn't regulate their emotions. And for the longest of me, I was like, wow, what is this all about? Because at the end of the day, like in education, they're always like, okay, graduate, get them college and career ready, out the door. But I began to realize that, okay, yes, we do want to put emphasis that, but my mission is to produce citizens who want to have compassion and understand who they are and want to lead in a way that might not necessarily fit the mode of what I would say society may be pushing. But I had one student, and I continued to talk to the individual over and over and over again, planting seeds. And then eventually, ran into that student years and years later, and they messaged me on Facebook because I was one of those, and I still am one of those educators. I'm not accepting no friend requests from, students, even they could be adults, because I do have students that are like in their 20s now, and I'm like, I'm not accepting, no, that's totally different. No, but they literally reached out to me, and they just told me, due to the conversations that we had, and how I believed in them, that really made them grow up, made them see exactly that they can be anything that they wanted to be. And so when I hear those stories, or I meet students that I haven't seen in a long time, out, at the grocery store, things like that, that makes me feel even better knowing that, hey, I just don't want them to be college or career ready. I want them to be focused, because at the end of the day, a kid can have A's and B's and they can be college career ready, but if their heart and their spirit is not in the right spot, in the right place, or if they don't even know how to be organized or don't know about money saving, and then we're not setting that child up for success. We're just setting them up to go to college.
Mm.
And that is like my
Mhm.
biggest thing. I mean, I'm like, okay, yeah. I tell my kids all the time, yes, I'm glad y'all have those good grades, but I need you to know how to make sure you make up that bed. You need to know how that you have responsibilities of taking out this garbage, you know? So there's different things that I think sometimes that is missing from today's society, that we kind of feel like it has to be instant. So,
Mm. Yeah.
yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yes, a million times, because I think whether you're working with children or adults or who in the education realm or not, like that rings true in so many ways. You know, we are told we should get A's, and like the proverbial A's and B's.
Mhm.
Like if we're getting A's and B's in our
Yeah.
school or at our work or, you
Yeah.
know, whatever way, um, then that's the goal, right? But some of us really need to like backtrack, and it's okay to just learn how to make your bed and
Yes.
focus on that. Whether and that might be making your proverbial bed of like creating some practices for yourself, like you're talking about, right? Or like
Yes.
I don't know, like just kind of again going back to that human part of you and
Mhm.
like learning the workings of yourself
Yes.
on just the A's and B's, like the deliverables, right?
Yes, we want to have good humans. We want to raise good humans. We want people to go out there and be productive citizens in the society. And knowing that not everyone is, college, material, but knowing that every student does have a gift and talent. Every student is capable of greatness. Every student has some sort of leadership skills. We just have to pull it up out of them. And so it's our job as educators to help the child navigate through that, so they can be productive and be the best and highest version of themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm sure you do that same with like your clients in your coaching world
Yes,
too, right? Like
yes.
it's that translates over to them, and it's just I think it's a good lesson for all of us to take and hold. And it's something that I forget sometimes too. I can get caught up in wanting to get the A's and B's, you know, as we say. So it's important and it's helpful. Is there anything about that I should ask about, like what gets you excited or your work that like we haven't talked about yet, or I didn't know enough to ask about yet?
Say what really like brings me joy as by doing this work is, I'm gonna give an example. Of course, as you can tell me, I'm a storyteller.
I love it.
But it was probably approximately maybe like 2 or 3 weeks ago. So we took our family up to Mount St. Francis, had a family get together. It was like our family, but then immediate family, but other people came and joined us. And we took our kids like hiking. We was out there for like 4 or 5 hours, all that good stuff. And then so we came back home, and I noticed that it was going to rain. And I hadn't done this in a long time. I do grounding. Now I do practice like going outside, putting both of my feet outside on the grass, and just grounding my feet and my spirit and being centered, and just listening to what the nature is expressing to me, but giving gratitude to nature, but then also just understanding what God has for me in this moment. And if there's something that I need to like just let go of, then I need to let go of. But and that's something that I practice like this morning, but I do often. But back to in reference to this piece, so I was like, oh man, it looks like it's about to rain. And I remember as a child, I don't know if anybody can, relate to this, but I was one of those kids. I loved to be outside and play in the rain. Like that was me. That was me. It was something about the rain that it just feels like it just rejuvenate me. It restored me. It cleansed me. It was just so much fun. I always felt like lighter afterwards. So I told my kids and my husband, I said, okay, I had a lot of time with y'all today. We had fun. Mommy is going outside on the back deck, and she is going to sit out here, and I'm going to meditate, and I'm going to wait for the rain to come. So they were like, well, did you look up and see what time the rain is coming? Like, what's the percentage? And I was like, well, I'm looking at the clouds and I can see that it's going to be raining. So I was out there for about an hour, just sitting in my chair, looking at the trees, sway, praying, meditate, just being in stillness, looking at the cardinal birds come and eat, all that good stuff. And then all of a sudden, I guess hour was too long for my kids. So my kids came outside and it hadn't rained. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm just literally trying to have some time to myself. But I paused and the Holy Spirit was like, this is a teachable moment, Angel. This is a teachable moment. So I said, okay, kids, this is what mommy's doing because they know I love sunbathing, but the sun wasn't out, hence because it was about to rain. So they asked me what I was doing. I'm like, hey, I want to get wet. I want to be in the rain. And so they said, can we do it? So they pulled up their chairs. I'm like, but there's no talking out here. I told them, you all have to be quiet. So hence there was no clocks. They waited for probably about a good 30 minutes and the rain started coming. And hope I don't get teared up on this, but it was just so purifying. And they sat and they looked at me and I looked at them and they smiled. So to know that I am teaching them the importance of stillness, that I'm teaching them the importance of going inward, the importance of nature, the importance of stepping away from technology or distractions. That's why I do the work.
Mm.
I do the work, of course, for myself to grow and to learn, but I'm not going to always be here. And I want to be able to pass the torch. I want to be able to pass the tools to my kids to let them know that, hey, this world can be mean, it can be cruel, but also this world is a beautiful place. And I want y'all to tap into the goodness of nature, the goodness of God, and the goodness of community because we all have good hearts. It's just some of us have been hurt and we haven't healed from the brokenness.
Mm.
And that's why we pass on hate and judgment because we haven't done the healing ourselves. So that's my why.
Mm. Oh, thank you for sharing that story.
You're welcome.
I don't think I need to ask anything more. I think that speaks for itself. Absolutely. I just feel that feeling in my body as you tell me that story. I think like when we speak truth in that way of like a deep truth, we can feel it, and I feel the truth of that story. So thank you. As we sort of start to wrap up for today, because I think that's a great place to sort of start winding down.
Yeah.
We always ask this at the end of every episode: is there like a practice that is kind of special to you, or kind of can give us a taste of the work that you do, that you and I can do right now, and our listeners can kind of like listen in or take part in, and we can all kind of wrap that up together with a practice today.
Yeah. There's a couple of practices that I do. I know I say a couple of mantras, and then I'm trying to think of one that we could do together. So I guess I could just kind of walk you through a meditation that I do when I'm going outside. So yeah.
Yeah, I would love that.
Oh, yeah, we'll do that. All righty. So the first thing we're going to do is just going to take a couple of deep breaths in and out. So this is what I normally say. And of course, the listeners, they don't have to repeat after me because they may not be in agreement, but oh, well, that's okay. But just as long as you're in the same space. So I'm going to take a deep breath in and out. Take a deep breath in and out. So I'm going to take another deep breath in and out. And as I'm taking the deep breaths in and out, the first one is in the name of the Father, in the name of the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And as I took those deep breaths in and out, I am welcoming myself into understanding who I am in this present moment. I am standing firm in the ground, Mother Nature, all feet, all toes, both feet planted in the ground. And my eyes are closed. As I open my eyes, I begin to see the stillness of the tree that is in front of me. I am asking myself to focus on one leaf that is on that tree. And as I focus on this leaf, I begin to give gratitude to Mother Nature, because I know that this tree had to undergo various storms, various circumstances to even be present in this moment. Once it was a seed, that seed began to take root and grow, and it became a tree. And this tree had to undergo various storms, various seasons, but understanding that where that leaf is right now is where it's supposed to be. And it's supposed to be right there so I can focus on and meditate. And as I'm meditating, I'm taking deep breaths in and out, focusing on my breath work, focusing on inhaling the goodness and the abundance of life that I'm supposed to receive, and releasing any negativity that may surround me. And so what happens? I do that each and every moment, reflecting on the goodness of surrounds me. There are the wind that is blowing the leaf. As the wind blows that leaf, my eyes are still focused on that. Why? Because there's greatness in me. I should stand firm and tall as this tree does. And regardless of what comes up against me, the wind, the rain, the storm, I know that there's sunlight that will continue to hit that leaf because it's still there. And so as I end this meditation, as this breath work in and out, I give myself gratitude for showing up in this space. I give myself respect for taking the time. I give myself encouragement in the midst of today. I appreciate myself for taking just 2 or 3 minutes to acknowledge who I am and knowing that I'm standing firm in this moment, like the tree. And then finally, I give myself time, knowing that as each and everything that's planted here on Mother Earth, it takes time to grow, just as this tree had time to grow. Amen. And so that is a practice that I do sometimes just to get myself grounded and refocus. And I practice yoga. I did yoga today, 3 days a week. You have to. And at the end of the night, I write in my journal or I read a book. But so today's Friday, as we're recording this, that means T, which is time. So I reflect. How did I show myself time? What time did I spend with myself today? How did I give time to others? But it all starts with you. It all starts with you. And there's no right or wrong practice. I want to tell people out there, there is no right or wrong practice. You have to find what fits you. I'm a big sunbather. I like to be out in the sun and just pray and meditate for hours. Do what fits you. So that would be my advice.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing. That was such a beautiful practice. Oh, I loved it. And I'm sure that was meaningful for so many of our listeners as well, just to give them a moment to stop and to pause and to consider those things, because we're just not given permission from the world to do that. So we have to give ourselves permission to do it.
Yes, most definitely.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Angel Jackson, thank you, Angel, so much for being here with us today, for this beautiful conversation, for sharing your wisdom. If folks want to learn more about you, find where they can get your book, learn more about the work that you do, where can they do that? And we'll make sure to put all of this in the show notes too as well.
Yes, yes. So they can visit me at oneholisticliving.com. And they can learn more about the work that I do, but then also they can purchase the books. And then also I have some t-shirts called Give Greatness, which stands for gratitude, respect, encouragement, appreciation, and time. And then you can follow me on Instagram, but I will be honest, I am not a big social media person. I am working on that, but you can follow me on at I am Dr. Jackson. So yes.
Awesome. Oh, thanks so much. And we will make sure to put all of that in the notes. And yeah, check out Dr. Jackson's work. He has so much to offer and so much to share. And I'm so, again, just grateful for you today. So thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.